Hello, my name is Margaret Medora, and I'm a social worker here at Children's Center Thunder Bay on the preschool assessment and consultation team. On our preschool assessment and consultation team, we have three main roles. The first of which is to offer individual support to children who may be having a hard time in childcare. And the second might be more to offer a little bit more of a program, consultation, and recommendations that might help a certain program as a group support the children and better meet their needs in the environment. And the third thing that we often do is provide some professional development opportunities for educators, such as this presentation that you're watching today, specifically self-care for educators in early childhood settings. But know that we have quite a lengthy list of presentations that we do offer, and we are working to have them all pre-recorded so that you can watch them whenever it's sort of convenient and makes the most sense for you. And then we offer the opportunity afterwards for a program or a referral to on any of these topics where we could make the information a little bit more relevant to your specific program and what you're going through. So know that you can talk to us or also utilize your RC to help support some of this content becoming more relevant to your specific centers. So I will be turning off my camera in just one moment so that I'm not covering up the slides for you and it's a little less distracting for me with all the things on the screen. But it's very nice to meet you, and I hope that this is helpful. And again, feel free to reach out and put in referrals for any of those things that I mentioned in terms of our roles. So before we begin our presentation, I just want to acknowledge that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty Territory of 1850, and that the land on which we work, live, and serve our children, youth, and families is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. We really want to recognize and honor the contributions made to our community by the Métis people and the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples on this land, which is in keeping with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. We're doing our best here at CCTB to follow as many of the recommendations as we can and do our part. Another thing I just want to mention in terms of this presentation is just that watching this and hearing some of the information might have an impact on people that, oh, I haven't been coping very well, or maybe realize certain things about the kind of self-care or things that they have been doing and wondering if it is or is not helpful for them. So just know that there are other resources that you can utilize if you're feeling a little bit triggered by some of this content, or maybe I do want to reach out and access some other services for myself. Know that here at Children's Center, we do offer walk-in counseling. It is currently being offered at 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And there's specific hours when it's offered, but it's easy to Google it and figure out when that is. So in terms of the agenda of what we're going to cover today, we want to talk about the reality of the work of early childhood education and why it's so difficult. We want to talk a little bit about understanding stress and burnout, and then really looking more specifically at what self-care and wellness looks like. Am I doing things that are helpful, or maybe am I accidentally doing some things that are harmful? I'm putting my hand up here. I know you can't see it, but I'm definitely found as putting this presentation together and really thinking about the material, some of my own kind of self-care routines and, thinking about how I can tweak them for myself as well. Another really important thing we're going to talk about is how to build resiliency and how to get through difficult times. And the last thing, we're just going to really look at how do I kind of find meaning and help myself get through the daily work life. So one of the most important things that's important to really put out there and remember about ECE work is that children's mental health relies so strongly on the adults around them. So that kind of puts us as the adults helping children in a bit of a difficult position where we really have to address our own relationships, how we're getting along with others, especially in the room, our own emotions, whether we're bringing things from outside of the room or getting frustrated or having feelings about what's happening in the room, um, and sort of making tweaks to the environment to help ourselves in order to be better able to support kids with their own things. And we're really looking to help children with their own relationships, emotions, and, you know, making it as best they can in the environments that we've kind of provided for them. So, unfortunately, the reality is that stressed adults does result in stressed children. So, for ourselves, it really is important to try and manage the stress as best we can so that it's not coming off. They're like sponges, they soak up everything and then they kind of throw it back in our faces. So, the more we can do for ourselves is really benefiting the entire group and all of the children. Kids demand so much of us. And again, our adult stressors can really impact our ability to be attuned and present and meet those needs that they do have. So always remember that they're kind of looking to us and they feel like if you're okay, then I'm okay, or I'm gonna be okay. This situation is gonna be okay because you look fine, right? So again, just in these pictures, we can see all these kids are pretty distressed, but we have an educator here who's able to be attentive and help them through it. Whereas here we might have some adults going through something a little bit more challenging. Maybe they're debriefing, discussing something, but whatever's going on with them, this child is left kind of here to their own devices. And sometimes we do find that that results in children having a bit more of a difficult time. So it's really important to acknowledge, why am I having such a hard time? Why am I feeling so bad? And it's important to acknowledge how demanding your work is with these little ones. Children in these young childcare settings are at a developmental stage where they can't communicate very well. So a lot of times you see things coming out in behaviors that might be aggression because it's those natural instincts coming out. I want that. I'm just going to do anything in my power to get it. Or you told me no, so I'm going to react almost, instinctively into fight mode. They go into fight, flight, freeze, and they don't even know. They can't reflect on it. They can't communicate it. So a lot of times what we see is really difficult. Their brain is still developing. They haven't been able to master those regulation skills, and they do rely so much on relationship with adults to be able to learn that. And knowing too that some of our little ones are going through really hard times, they might be experiencing trauma at home, and that's one of the only ways that their brain knows how to respond to the stressful environments of childcare. Again, this is sort of in relation to that, but young children can't tell us what's wrong. We're going to see it in their behavior. And it's not always clear, unfortunately. As much as we might be trying to figure out the message, it can be really difficult. Overall, we are seeing an increase in challenging behaviors. There's delayed social emotional skills, a little bit less curiosity, less engagement in learning. And everyone's going to find different behaviors a little bit more challenging than others. There's pretty high expectations. And I think that a lot of educators that I've spoken to really do want to do the best that they can for children and provide these really great environments for them. So then ourselves, we put those expectations on, and then they also from the employer and from standards set by the ministry and all those kinds of things. Sometimes we feel like we have really good support, and sometimes, unfortunately, we might feel a little bit more alone in our environment, in our work environment. We might feel like maybe we don't have leadership that can help understand the feelings that we're going through and support us to do things differently or better. Or maybe we have coworkers we can rely on and talk things through with, or maybe we just feel like we don't have anyone to turn to. So that can definitely take a big toll as well. Having a good coworker relationship will really increase that workplace satisfaction. So investing in that relationship and how you can communicate well together is always a good idea. Unfortunately, you're in a profession that is underpaid and underappreciated, and we take every opportunity we can here at CCTB to let you know how much you are valued and, recognized and we know the work that you do, and we know how difficult it is and how important and how beneficial it is to all these children and families. So keep doing the good work, but we know that sometimes that does end up taking a toll. It kind of feels like we're forgotten, we're left out of things, we're not seen the same way as teachers, even for some reason. And that's a really unfortunate problem in our society. But just know that sometimes that does kind of underlie some of the difficulties that we're feeling. We are all human. Life can impact our work, and a lot of times there's a lot going on in our lives. There's health issues for people that we know or ourselves. So it's really important to know that those kinds of things are going to make doing difficult work even harder at times. Sometimes there is a little bit of a chaotic environment. I know for myself, I'm someone who does feel sensory things. I'm a sensitive one. And I know that going into childcare sometimes for me can be overwhelming. So sometimes when you add all these factors together, and of course it's going to be hard to kind of make it through the day. Um, and knowing that COVID has actually also increased a lot of difficulties and strains that we didn't used to feel, and now we do. You know, we second guess things that we didn't. Um, and it does contribute to that environment being a little bit more difficult as well. Remembering too that caring can be really draining. You're working so hard with these little ones, you're so invested, you really do want the best for them. And sometimes that in and of itself can be draining. It can be recharging, but it can also be draining. So this is just sort of a reminder to remember all those things in that previous slide. You know, there's always things that come out on the surface that workplaces may recognize, or your coworker might say, oh hey, wow, you're really distracted, or why aren't you doing the things that so and so told us to do, or you're not really talking to me anymore. So people will sometimes see some of these things at the tip of the iceberg and start to wonder. Sometimes people make their own assumptions, but it's important to remember, for yourself and for others that might be going through things, and not kind of making assumptions about what we see on the surface, because there are all these underlying things underneath the iceberg that goes pretty deep into the ocean. There's environmental, interpersonal, lots of job related stressors at work. There's people not sleeping well, people not eating well, experiencing depression, maybe even having pain or some new diagnosed illness. There's relationship, financial issues, just other stresses of living. I have a toddler. I'll say that sometimes adds a huge level of stress that didn't used to be a part of my life. So everyone has a lot going on, and we want to remember that when we see someone having a difficult time, or some things that might just look like unprofessional or those kinds of things. It's always really good to check in and try to make sure we're supporting each other. Another thing that is just has to be mentioned at this time, and I don't know how long this is going to be a part of our lives, but it might be kind of ongoing. But remember that we've all sort of been through and experienced this trauma together. There was this risk to our safety that we all felt for so long, especially being, so vulnerable with children in close proximity and not able to wear masks and that kind of thing. So just remembering that it does take away from our bank of resources, energy, ability. We can't be as creative. There's always this underlying layer that didn't used to be there that affects our coping. And also remembering that everyone's going through it at the same time, but it does impact everybody very differently. So what you went through with COVID isn't going to be the same as somebody else. The things that you worried about isn't going to be the same as somebody else. So trying to be respectful of everybody in this time, but acknowledging that, oh, yes, this might be a really big reason as to why this child doing this behavior today is like, I can't even handle it. Whereas in the past, maybe you could address it and move on a little bit more easily. So be mindful of that and gentle on ourselves. So stress can come off a lot of different ways to children. And we just want to acknowledge that sometimes, unfortunately, it can come off as looking like mean, weak, or gone to the children. So sometimes um, educators might tend to be a little bit harsh if they're feeling some extreme stress. They might have some unrealistic expectations of children. They might um, put out some consequences that are beyond their developmental understanding. They might use sarcasm or humor in a way that children can't really understand. Um, so they might use blame, negative attention towards the family, all kinds of wonky things can start to happen when people are feeling a lot of stress. So we have to be cautious about our reactions and really thinking about how did this come off to the children, those kinds of things. There's a difference between everybody, let's keep our space instead of saying, stay away from each other. Do you want to get sick? So our reactions, we really need to be monitoring and making sure that we're keeping them in line so the children don't feel that harshness and think of us as being mean, which is never what we intend. Sometimes we can come off seeming a little bit weak with the children. Children shouldn't have to comfort or worry about adults. We are the ones who should be putting in place expectations and limits and helping them meet them. So sometimes when we are extremely stressed, we kind of go to that zone of not having those same routines or expectations, or letting the kids get away with things that normally we might not. And that can also create some bigger issues down the road. We might be really, really anxious. We might have lots of fear responses. So just being mindful about how we are coming off with our own concerns to the children. And then sometimes we sort of reach that point where our stress level is so high, we don't have the ability to carry through some of those daily interactions that we used to. So we avoid contact with children or families, retreat through sanitization. I have to do cleaning, just focusing on some of those housekeeping items rather than engaging with the children and doing some of the important work that's needed to keep them flowing throughout the day. So that being said, try to monitor yourselves for stress versus burnout, because too much stress over time does result in burnout. So stress sort of looks like sometimes going into overdrive motion, right? You're getting a little bit more emotional. You're really preoccupied by everything. You're starting to feel really tired. You're maybe starting to have a lot of worries creep in, and you're just starting to feel really drained. And your body's like, can I keep doing this? Can I sustain this? Burnout, however, is more that like disengaged, I'm done. Like I've been stressed out for so long, my body can no longer sustain this. I don't feel as much. I don't feel hopeful or helpful. I don't feel motivated to do things. I can't think of ideas to do things. I'm not creative. I'm not fun. I'm not curious. Feeling a little bit more depressed, and maybe even noticing that the damage is emotional. The physical has sort of burnt out, and now it's just this emotional, raw state. Um, so over time, so much stress does lead to burnout. So that's why we need to be cautious and take steps when we notice those stress symptoms kind of building up, so that we don't get to this point where we're just running on this very empty battery. It's easier to recover from stress than burnout. You might need some extra support, actual professional support, because it's a little bit further than usual support network can handle. So it's not permanent. It is something that we can recover from, but it takes a lot of time and effort. So try to notice those signs of stress and reach out before burnout happens. So just a little reminder that stressed Eric looks a little bit like, ah, but burnt out Eric was not even able to come in for the photo. So again, this is just, I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, but it's just important to remember that some of these signs, like getting stuck on small things that didn't used to bother you, getting disorganized or forgetful, having trouble sleeping, thinking about the children all the time, little things about your colleagues that you used to kind of laugh about or find charming might suddenly become really irritating. I can't cope with this. You might kind of be thinking those kinds of things. Struggling to get things done. feeling like you can't take a break or you never do take a break, those kinds of things really are at risk to some bigger consequences, like maybe even calling in sick, leaving the profession, and not even just calling in sick, but you are actually physically sick because of all the being in overdrive all the time, not being compassionate for your work and your children. So just really being mindful of the relationship between these two and trying to take those steps early on when you can. And these are just some reminders about the difficult work that you do. You know, you're not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You know, we have to take care of ourselves so that we are able to help and support other people. We need to give ourselves that permission to take care of ourselves. And it's the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and others. It doesn't mean me first, it means me too. Remembering too that you can't pour from an empty cup. We need to think about that bucket filling book that we read with the kids so often. And you need to think about that for yourself. What does fill my cup so that I can give to others? And again, I always come back to this. My mom always says this to me, but put on your own oxygen mask before helping those around you. So we really do need to make sure that we can at least survive before we help others. Otherwise, we will not be helping anybody. So just some visual reminders to kind of help us put that a little bit in perspective. So when we do talk about self-care, it's a difficult topic and it's hard to know what self-care is going to work. Everybody's so different, but sometimes we think about certain things as self-care. So maybe going on vacation, going to a spa, but it's almost like we're saving up our stress and not doing anything about it on the daily basis. And then what do we think is going to happen after that one-time event? Is that going to change everything? No. So it is really important to address our stresses as we go and not only think of self-care as being, I'm going to take a bath or I'm going to go to the spa with my friend and get my hair done and all those types of things, because you might find that really at the end of the day, how did that help coping through all these difficult things? It might make you feel good for a little period of time. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be doing those things, but just remembering that there might be a little bit more involved with coming up with a more helpful self care routine. Again, vacations can be very restful and restorative, but then we come back to the daily grind, and it's more about finding those things within that we can do for ourselves regularly. So just some other examples of, the self-care world might also be really putting pressure on us to want to buy certain things and have all these gadgets and, maybe we lean into some not so great coping, sometimes using alcohol or, sugary things, that type of stuff, and maybe even engaging in overspending and types of things that actually create worse situations for ourselves in the end. Um, as seen in this picture, sometimes we can get into patterns where we're eating, maybe not the best food or we're eating too much, maybe watching TV and sort of isolating and not engaging in activities that actually keep us going in a sustainable way. So it's hard because I think sometimes it's, something that does get us through is having a little reward or a treat that kind of brings up you know, our endorphin levels or those kinds of things. We get that happy rush. We get something good that comes from it. And sometimes we might feel like that's the only way I know how to get a good feeling out of the day. But just being mindful of that and maybe drawing your attention to that. Oh, is there something else I could be doing that actually might help me in a more sustainable way with my self-care? And being mindful of what we're telling ourselves, I deserve this, I need this, because sometimes can become a habit that gets really difficult to break. So restorative practice is one that when it's over, you actually feel more energized and refreshed, and you have more energy rather than some of these things that actually kind of contribute to depleting us in the end. So, some of the things to think about in comparison with some of the things we just revisited is like very simple ways of eating well, sleeping well, and moving well in our daily life. So trying our best to think about our bodies and what do they need and how do we do that. And sometimes it is a mix of putting some of the other, treats and those little things. It's not to say that those are bad, but it really is thinking about how does it all work together and what do I do to make it all, again, sustainable and good for your body. So this is just a little saying, when you finally kind of look to your body and say, I want to be your friend and I want to take care of you. And I've been waiting my whole life for this. Might be sometimes what our bodies are wanting and feeling from us, because it is easy to fall into some of those little traps where we might be doing what we think is self-care and it also might be not helping us in the long run. So again, not to bring any guilt or shame into the conversation. It's really just about being mindful and trying to think about, okay, maybe should I go for a walk at least, instead of just having like, okay, I'm going to sit down to the TV and eat this treat, right? And I want to put my hand up right here as saying that I am probably one of the people who does this the most. And I know that about myself. And putting this work together really did help me sort of acknowledge that and realize that maybe I could be doing things a little bit differently. So the next thing I want to move into is talking about resilience, because self-care and managing our bodies in a healthy way is one thing, but we also want to think about it from what are we doing in our mind and our actions to kind of get through. So resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or any significant sources of stress, and really meaning bouncing back from difficult experiences. So from research, we've learned that there are three things that resilient people do to recover more quickly from difficulty. So, the first thing is really expecting that difficult things will happen in life. Sometimes I think we have that question that comes to our mind when something bad happens: why me? Why is this happening to me or my family or someone that I care about? But really, it can be helpful to have a different perspective on it and actually think about, well, why wouldn't this happen to me? This is something that happens in life to everybody and anybody. So just having that different frame of mind and expectation takes out a layer of distress. And it's not something that's easy. It takes a lot of practice to change your outlook about things that will happen, but you can get there and you can make that a practice. The second thing is knowing where to focus attention. And this is also a difficult one, but if you can sort of work on mastering that, it makes a big difference to focus on the things that you can control and the things that you can do, because a lot of times the situation is pretty out of our hands and there's not a lot that we can do. And we often get caught up in all of those components. So really it is, what can I do? And thinking about things that are positive and that you do feel grateful for, despite the fact that there might be a lot of really negative things happening. So the third thing is thinking, is this helping or hurting me, what I'm doing, and act accordingly? So again, when we talked about self-care, this sort of reminds me of that. Is watching TV and eating some snacks helping me, or is it actually hurting me? And you're going to have to balance that. And for everybody, every situation is going to be a little bit different. Maybe you are doing enough other things that are positive for your mind and body, that's okay. And it's definitely can be a helpful strategy to unwind on those kinds of things. But really just focusing on, is it helping or is it hurting? Is looking at the COVID numbers every single day helping? Do I feel like, okay, I have an idea of what's going on and that makes me feel confident? Or is it hurting me and getting my anxiety to spiral under control? Again, everything is going to be different for every person, but just think about the things going on in your life that you're thinking about, worrying about, stressing about, and try to have these things in mind as you deal with them. I also want to talk about 7 skills of resilience, and we're going to talk about each one a little bit more in detail. Um, so the first one is cultivate a belief in your ability to cope. So remind yourself that you have what you need inside of you to get through whatever difficult thing is happening. Take a moment to think about all the capacities that you have and you can bring to the current situation. Focus on the things that are not dependent on other people, but your own qualities, like being determined, feeling strong or tough, having a good sense of humor, being genuine. So, kind of, you can use this as your own template and think about what things apply to you. What's going to help me get through this situation? What have I relied on in the past? What has helped me before? And think about those qualities and see how they can help you in whatever situation is going on. And it can be even working with a certain child. You might really want to think about that. How do some of my qualities fit well with what they're needing and what I need to do? Stay connected with sources of support. That's really can be difficult because sometimes we just want to sort of cocoon away and hide away, but sometimes we really actually do need that sense of a tribe. We need to feel safe and supported. We need to feel like the social animals that we are. We need to know that people will, drop things off, send funny memes, or, you know, talk about things that help us get through. So surround yourself with those supports, actively connect with them, remembering that the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued is extreme. And when we can give and receive that without judgment, they derive sustenance and growth from the relationship. So, really, we're getting so many great things when we are able to connect with each other and help each other get through really difficult things. And in the childcare setting, this is especially important because you really do have a group um, team dynamic that's important for the best interest and survival of the whole childcare. So, really prioritizing those relationships is important. Talking about what you're going through is really important. So sometimes when people are depressed or going through something really difficult, they do want to isolate. And remember that talking about what you're going through spreads the load a little bit. It might be helpful to vent and talk about it. But being mindful that sometimes when we do talk about things that are negative, we have a little bit of a risk of sometimes getting stuck in a cycle of negativity. So we want to be able to share and we want to be able to connect about the experiences we're going through that may be difficult things in the workplace that can be hard to resolve. But knowing that if we get stuck there or other coworkers come to see us negatively, there can be a really big buildup that does make it hard to move on from. So thinking about, are we holding each other up here by talking about this, or are we pulling each other down? Are we validating each other and moving on, or are we just getting stuck and making everybody feel negative? Knowing too that a negative environment does impact other workers around and the kids. So sometimes it can be helpful just to touch base as a group or as a co-dynamic. How can we move on together once we're sharing our negative feelings? How do we help each other reframe maybe what's going on? Or how do we come up with solutions rather than just sort of getting stuck in the negative muck? Also thinking about the time and place that you're having some of these discussions. It's probably not appropriate to be venting and having some of this feelings in front of the children, or just even if you're trying to keep it really on the down low, then you're not as attentive to the children. So really thinking about where and when we're doing these things and remembering that these kind of like the talk and the feelings do sort of lead to cycling back and forth and can get stuck in that negative feeling. This is another really great reminder just to be thinking about, are we venting and doing some of these things, or are we dumping and getting kind of stuck in a mess here? So venting really looks at not blaming others, trying to stick to one topic, acknowledging your part in something or a mistake, not self-victimizing, but just looking at the situation as this is what happened, and really maybe processing what went down and what your role was in it, coming up with a solution together, trying to be open to feedback as much as possible, not just coming back to the same issue, because part of the venting hopefully means that, okay, I was able to move past this and maybe we came up with a bit of an idea or a solution, or we just accepted the way things are now. Doesn't take up too much time, listens and acknowledges and validates others, and it does feel beneficial. remembering that dumping is kind of the opposite of that, and you end up with that toxic feeling and a pileup of issues that's difficult to get out of or move on from. So I'll just stay on this for a minute so everyone has a second to read everything. But you will find you'll kind of get stuck. People get defensive. It's often kind of blaming. So just being mindful about how you are having some of these conversations, because it can be really good and really healthy and actually really connecting to vent together. Just being mindful of trying not to dump and create that toxic environment. Another thing that can be really helpful in terms of building resiliency is being helpful to others. Sorry, I'm just about to sneeze here. May or may not. So when you see that you can make a difference and reduce someone else's pain or make somebody else happy, it reduces, there it is, our feelings of helplessness. It can really enhance our sense of control and efficacy in the world by doing helpful things. And sometimes it can help us not get overwhelmed. So again, remembering that not only this, or otherwise we'll end up with the empty cup or, setting ourselves on fire, which is not what we're trying to do. We don't want to burn ourselves out. It's thinking more about those little things that we can do to help others that don't drain us and actually also kind of fill our own bucket. So everyone's going to feel a little bit differently about what that will be, but trying to be mindful to be kind and thoughtful of others. Another really, really important one that can be easy is to really activate positive emotion and engage in things that make you laugh or happy, give you those joy feelings. Think about how to feel gratitude, appreciation, love, intimacy, connection to the beauty of nature. It can be pleasures of a home cooked meal. Some people really get those endorphins from exercise, like a runner's high, or tapping your feet to music, listening to music. Maybe a sense of accomplishment that comes from completing something, whether it's a reno project or a craft project. Um, but just remembering that there are so many great positive things that the world has to offer. And sometimes when we get overly stressed, we're approaching burnout, we really just go into survival mode and focus on what we need to get done. And we forget sometimes that we can still find time and space to incorporate positive things that we love, taking time to do a little bit of reading or gardening, or just making that half an hour to get out and go for a short walk out in nature and see the trees and smell all those great natural smells. Whatever it is that's going to fill your cup. And again, so different for everybody, but just thinking about what is it for me? What can bring me those really great positive feelings? And I'm going to do it. And also remembering that you can bring some of these things into the classroom. If you're someone who loves playing games or you love crafts, try to implement that a little bit more so that you are filling your cup as you engage and help the children learn in their own way. I think we've also forgotten a little bit how to be fun and how to just be silly. So I think that incorporating that into the classrooms will really help the adults and the children move forward. It's not just COVID, but I think COVID added to a sense of stress that everybody was already feeling, and it's kind of taken it to the next level. So remembering, hey, you know what? I am going to do something silly and fun with the kids. We're going to sing these songs. We're going to do these little dances. I'm going to say something silly, or I'm going to put my boot on my head, or, whatever it is that's going to get a laugh and get everyone feeling really good together. So this is actually one of maybe the easiest and most important. If you have to take any one thing away, it's something very doable, and hopefully you all find something that you can do for yourselves and that you can also bring into the classrooms with you. So cultivating an attitude of survivorship is another thing that you can do. Bad things happen to good people. Um, a lot of things in life, unfortunately, are outside of our control, which can be a really uncomfortable place for people. But the more we focus on feeling helpless, we feel more like a victim. So when we focus on being survivors, we activate our inner strength and we create a narrative that we can sort of carry into life after whatever hard thing we're going through, whether it's the pandemic or any other negative thing that's happening in our lives. We can help ourselves through it by reminding ourselves that things will pass. We have survived difficult things. Um, everything that's not Everything's not going to make sense that happens to us. It's not going to seem fair, all those kinds of things. So just finding our ways through and knowing that we do have skills that we can lean back on to help get us through hard things. And we have people that can help us get through hard things and that you will get through it. So seeking meaning is one that's going to mean something different to everybody. Um, Everyone can find meaning despite whatever their beliefs may be, and it can really help in a difficult time like this. So start by considering your existing beliefs and sources of meaning that you have. You might believe that what matters most is how you treat others and connect to a deep personal sense um, to the value of family, or it might be that you do believe in some sort of spiritual or religious body that kind of helps you with a greater purpose. So, whatever that may be for you, try to figure out what will give you the meaning that wanting to go on and kind of cope through all the difficult parts of your days in whatever difficult things are facing you right now. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. You know, we're all just trying to do our best in situations that are often beyond our control. And what can we do for ourselves and others? And what are we here for? What is the meaning? What is the meaning of a certain event? And what is the meaning kind of life for us? And really narrowing in on that and living by that. So, thinking about just your state of mind as a little bit of a recap. So, we can change a lot of what's going on just by changing what we're thinking. So, we often can't control what happens, but we can control what we think about it and how we respond to it. Mindfulness activities, there's lots on YouTube, but they can help us stay present and out of negative feelings. Acting with intention and meaning can help us in difficult times, and really aligning our actions with values. And try to think about this, especially in the classroom, and what you believe with your little ones, and showing them that and bringing that to the classroom as much as you can every day. So, the next section is just going to be a quick little exploration of what you could probably be doing in the classroom to help yourselves on the daily. So, adding meaning to regular routines is coming up with a ritual to take care of yourself. So, self care does mean committing to actions that we can integrate into our lives. And routine is something we do without really knowing that we're doing it. We're just sort of organizing our day, making sure we can get things done, get all the things of the morning routine, make sure everything's ready for the next day when we go to bed. So, rituals are kind of adding meaning to those routines that we already have. Um, they're often thought to be ceremonial, but they can be small little things that we can add. Even just doing our breathing, we breathe in fresh positive air and we breathe out the negative. So it's important to remember that there's lots of different ways of adding meaning and incorporating self care into things that you're already doing during the day. Breathe in calm, breathe out stress, figuring out those ways to make it meaningful. So, some ideas would be before you enter the room, set an intention to today. I will do my best with what has been placed before me, or today I will look for joy in the classroom. Today I will help us be lighthearted and laugh. So just remembering whatever it is that feels most important that you want to do. Why am I working with kids? What do I want for them and for me in this experience? So really trying to come back to that meaning, ground yourself in your profession and your love and passion for the work that may have been a little bit trampled by everything that's happened in the last few years and just the state of life right now. So, really coming back to that as best you can. Even using something like the light switch when you come on in the room. So, turning it off all the things that happened outside of the room and turning on your day in the program. Breathing in calmness and breathing out worry, like we just talked about, or breathing in positivity and breathing out negativity. Putting on your gear with a meaning. So whether it's, running shoes will help you stay ahead today, or lanyard means I'm available to help you now. Touching the wall, maybe putting on your mask and saying, this is protecting me from the stress and negativity of the room. So really just trying to think about ways that what you're already doing can become meaningful and give you that reminder of the bigger picture and what you're doing this for. Um, Sometimes even closing off parts of your day. These are mostly things we talked about for the beginning of the day, but um, was it going to be closing the door to the room is really putting away what happened. And same as you come in, putting away your home life, locking it in the car. Someone told me that you can use your car as a little chirp when you're locking it, and that's leaving everything, all your home worries in the car for later on. So just finding those little tips and tricks that'll help your brain sort of rewire and think about things in a little bit of a different way. So those are some ideas. Hopefully you'll think of some, even if it's not these ones, but something similar that sparks that for you, because they have to be meaningful to you. So just to leave you on a few warm, fuzzy notes, teaching is a work of heart. It takes a lot from you, but you're giving so much to these children and really such an integral part of their lives and their beginnings. The future of the world is in my classroom today, so a little bit of an inspirational tidbit just to help you remember that there is a greater purpose to doing this. And from tiny trees or seeds grow mighty trees. So just remembering that these little ones that you have are really there and soaking up everything that you have to offer. So trying to get to that place of giving them what that is you want, and working through the stressors that we talked about. So other things that you can do for yourselves throughout the day is know what you need and try to be able to ask for it. Look for supervision with your supervisors, talk to your coworkers, take breaks in a way that's going to be helpful to you. Am I just checking my phone? Is there something else I could be able to be doing that might help me get through the day a little bit better? Do I need to do some mindfulness? Do I need to do a body scan? Do I need to do some deep breaths? Can I do a quick muscle tensing and releasing? Water, going for a walk outside, watering plants. There's lots of different things that you can do as you go. Even when something difficult does happen, is there something you can do to help shake it off? Is there a quote that you can think of that helps you get through? Is there just inhaling and exhaling with intention, wiggling your toes, um, grounding your feet into the floor, really feeling that, maybe doing, if you look up on the internet, there's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness activity that I find really helpful sometimes just to help my brain calm down and not get too far away from me and help me remember what's actually happening in the moment. You can open the window to let out negativity, just coming up with some different ways to help you get through all the stressors of the day, using breaks. This is a really simple way to remember to do your breathing. You just start here, you breathe in. Oops, sorry, I almost went the wrong way. Breathe in and you would trace this with your finger, and then you breathe out and trace this with your finger. So there's lots of really neat, easy things on the internet that you can Google. Find one that speaks to you, find something that's easy for you to follow in your time of need that you can turn to. And then this is, again, just sort of thinking about the end of the day, when you're washing your hands, when you're closing the door, what can you do to remind yourself that, okay, this day is now done. Now I am returning home, and just building that strength and thinking about what can I do that's going to help me socially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, environmentally at the end of the day. So you could think about 3 things that went well today, let go of some of the things that didn't. Is it going to be a shake off? Do you have a little dance party when you get home and dance away the bad feelings? Some way to do that. Do you take off your gear? Okay, All the children's difficulties that happened today are now no longer with me. They stay in the garbage with my mask that I just took off, or, my goggles. I can see more clearly again now that my day is over. Just remembering that nature can be a really important part, and wellness, again, trying to make sure you're doing those things for your body that can be really helpful. So do what you can with what you have where you are. That's all we can do. That's all we're trying to do. And try to remember that we're not superheroes. We can't do everything. Be gentle to yourselves and and remember everything from this presentation. It might have felt long, but hopefully inspirational as well. If all you can do is crawl, start crawling. We're all starting somewhere. We're all at different places. We're all going to have different things that help us through. So try to make one thing that you can do to commit to your self-care after having watched this, and then try to see if there are things that you can really incorporate into your daily life. And definitely feel free to reach out to your RC or to us if you have specific questions about that. This is just a list of resources. Again, you won't be able to click on the links, unfortunately, but maybe we can make those accessible in a Word document or something. So we'll figure out a way, but always feel free to reach out if needed. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope that it was helpful and that you have some ideas moving forward about how to get through the stresses. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.